Plague. Piper J. Distel. We know that we are the children of God, and that the whole world is under the control of the evil one. 1 John 5:19. Prevent disease. Preface. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. I am the night, I am the darkness. I've been here since the beginning. As God sculpted this land from his heavenly clay, I watched, and I learned, and I waited. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind, in his own image, male and female, he created them, and he gave them to me, when he decided his divine creation was no longer worthy of greatness. Stage 1 Exposure. 1. Canada. Wednesday, March 5th, 1919. Ash Wednesday, Mammon Isle, Ontario, Canada. I begin by watching. Simple. Easy. Maisie giggles as Jack slides his clammy hand between her thighs, his brow furrowed in concentration. His breath comes in shallow bursts, the moist warmth mingling with the cool air, a vapor of tiny droplets that hang suspended between them. A malicious grin tugs at the orderly's lips. "You're a wicked girl, Maisie Holloway. Wicked, wicked." Flakes of snow cling to Maisie's chestnut hair. The thin layer of ice on which she is pinned cracks beneath her weight, soaking her bare back with frigid water. She gasps at the sudden cold. Blades of grass and curds of early spring muck, as thick and round as green peas, whisper beneath her, clinging to her freckled skin. The cross of dark ash, haphazardly etched across her forehead during the evening's mass, has smudged beyond recognition, a sorry blot of coarse black dust marred by sweat and lustful ignorance. She'd promised to be good this Lenten season, to be honest and chaste and thoroughly pure, the model of God's most obedient servant. A concentrated effort to uphold this vow had been made when Father Lawrence anointed her, pressed his calloused thumb against her forehead and drawled apathetically, "You are but ash, and to ash you shall return." But that devilishly handsome Nelson boy's flirtatious gaze from across the chapel had an unexpected effect on her more feminine desires, and before she knew it, Maisie Holloway was cold and naked in the darkened woods, making violent love to a man she had spoken less than 12 words to since he'd returned from overseas, wounded in mind but fiercely titillated in body. Oh, it's a lovely war." A sharp white light snakes through the naked trees. For a moment she fears they've been caught. Her breathing halts as she slaps a palm over her mouth. She sits up quickly, heart hammering against her breast. "Did you see that?" Jack, sweat beading on his forehead, forces a slobbery kiss against Maisie's neck. "I can't see a thing. The snap of a branch." Maisie pushes Jack's wandering hands away, conceals her naked breast with skinny arms. "What'd you do that for?" "Someone's out here with us." "No way. It's hours past curfew." He forces Maisie back down, lapping at her face with the desperation of a ravenous mutt. The distant sanitarium building glows like a beacon in the dark, the orange flames of her many lamps congealing into a single heavenly light, the watchful eye of God carefully assessing the silent grounds. The sight is eerie yet strangely comforting, matriarchal, safe, another snap, closer. Maisie's eyes dart around the forest, crooked tree limbs scrape the night sky, diseased and capped with fine white like the rotting fingers of a corpse covered in lye. The hum of nocturnal life grows louder. A loon cries. Something howls in the dark. "I'm scared, Jack. We should go back." "Not yet," Jack mumbles into her breast. "I'm not finished. I can't lose this job. Reverend Mother's already after my head. To hell with Reverend Mother, and to hell with this place." The orderly's gaze is heavy with arousal, glossy and red as a drunkard's. "You're so beautiful, Maisie." He slides his hand into the tousled mess of her hair, gripping firmly at the roots. A hint of pain flickers across Maisie's face, though she daren't cry out. "I want to fuck you raw, girl." Something oily grabs Maisie's bare ankle. She gasps. "Don't do that!" Don't grab me like that! Not with your wet hands! Jack blinks down at her in bewilderment. I didn't. He loosens his left hand from her hair, waving it in front of her face as proof of his innocence. His right hand remains buried between her slick thighs. See? The wind whistles through the pines. A voice, almost patronizing in its softness, Maisie, it whispers. I've got to go, Maisie says as she struggles against Jack's grasp. I have to be up early. Kitchen duty. She scrambles to her feet, scouring the forest floor for her nightdress and bloomers. She finds them a half step to the left, heavy with melted snow and clotted mud. A warmth seeps from the space between her thighs. She can feel it, a lifeblood, thick and sticky, tracing her skin. Shit, oh Christ. Reverend Mother's gonna kill me. You're so damn nervous. Jack laughs as he places a cigarette between his teeth. Loosen up, you're wound as tight as a drum. It's not becoming of a young lady. Shut up! Long, slender shadows seem to twist the naked foliage into grotesque creatures, mocking Maisie's vulnerability. She thinks she sees a face in the underbrush. She blinks. Maybe not. I'm going back. Don't be like that, Maisie. Jack grabs her arm wistfully, his expression taking on the wounded, wide-eyed dollar she's come to expect from young men. You're getting all feared over nothing. There are meat-eaters in these woods, you know that? Stab 'em under the nose, stab 'em in the groin. Jack runs Maisie's unwilling hand across the hardened bulge between his legs, eyes watering with exhilaration. From the other side of the vast forest clearing comes a shrill cry, the scream of a train whistle, the hiss of a boiling kettle, the manic bleat of a rabid wolf. The night falls silent then, with only the fizz of melting icicles churring in the dark. The sudden stillness is deafening, ringing in Maisie's ears like an orchestral crescendo. Jack looks on, bemused. Just a moose, nothing more. He lights a match with a flick of his thumbnail. Katie told me 'bout you, you know, talking in your sleep. Saying you been seeing things, strange and scary things. Another cry. Closer, colder, meaner. The sound coils around Maisie's spine like devil's ivy. The fine hair on the back of her neck stands at attention. She clenches her fists tightly at her sides, the beginnings of a prayer hanging from her lips. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. The air already biting has grown even colder, an oppressive inner frost that seems to constrict only the area in which the two stand. The night is rapidly darkening, as though the moon has been shaved away like a chunk of rock on a whetstone. One by one, the candles and lamps that burned so peacefully within the distant building extinguish, leaving only the small pinprick glow of Jack's cigarette to light their way back to safety. Soon. Jack shivers, gooseflesh puckering like boils on his exposed skin. Calm down, why don't you? There ain't nothing out here but you and me. He wraps his large arms around Maisie, pulling her close. The young girl tremors uncontrollably, the jackrabbiting of her heart so rapid it feels like sharp fists battering against his chest. I've got you. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. She relaxes against his chest, breathing in the stale and earthy scent of him. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. He plunges his hands between her thighs, forcing her against a nearby pine trunk. Snow tumbles from the firs, sending a flurry of ice crystals spiraling around them. The powdery frost that dusts Maisie's face and hair, and she lets out a yelp, half of anger and half of embarrassment, shoving Jack away with all her might. She craves the warmth of her bed, the clean stockings she'll slip onto her frozen feet, the cup of chamomile tea she'll brew in the morning. She can't wait to gossip with the other girls, to ostracize this horrid young man, make him sorry he ever laid a finger on her, dared to sully her upstanding reputation. I know Jack Nelson always says he's well-equipped, and maybe he is. For a toddler. Jack grabs Maisie's long hair, pulling her backward. He strikes her hard across the face, sending her sprawling onto the frozen ground, her head spinning as the searing pain from the strike blurs her vision. A thin stream of blood leaks from her left nostril. She cups her wounded nose in disbelief. The dry bitterness of the night stinging her dampened eyes, she happens a glance toward her lap and swears under her breath when she notices the interlacing abrasions that sully the pale flesh of her knees, angry claw marks from twisted roots and thorns that cower in waiting beneath the loose, spongy soil. Jack stubs the cigarette out between thumb and forefinger, blackening the pads of his skin with soot. He discards the dog end with a detached jerk, burying it in the sod at Maisie's feet. The crackling ember, barely thicker than the tip of a lead pencil, sputters, chokes, and then extinguishes beneath the weight of the wetness, drowning the duo in a tyrannical blackness. Another howl. "You're as crazy as they say, not good in bed neither, and ugly as a sinner." Jack turns on his heel and ambles into the dark, whistling a jaunty tune as Maisie begs for him to stay, screams apologies and assurances until her throat has gone raw with desperation. But he is gone, his bright song dissolving like ether into the night. Naked and shamed, Maisie collects the torn shreds of her dignity from the forest floor and clambers to her feet. The frigid air against her scraped skin burns like 1,000 icy needles, and she locks her jaw to hinder the pain, grasping around blindly in the dark. She wonders if the night might suddenly imprison her within, sprout sturdy walls made of blue moonlight, and swallow her whole. She cries out in frustration, stomping up and down like a spoiled child scorned, igniting sprinkles of grass and ice and damp earth as she rages, tears streaming down her cheeks, warm blood weeping from her broken nose. "You're an asshole, Jack Nelson. They should have let you die on the front." Only the wind balks in response. Maisie surveys the area with caution, grounding herself. To the left, the forest dips and then rises again, a tangled web of overgrown vine and gnarled root, thick and impossible to navigate in the low light. To the right, a man-made footpath of calcified earth embedded with worn stone and broken heath, uneven and treacherous, even in the daytime. The staff and patients are forbidden from venturing into these woods, and the powers that be have made bloody well sure that even the most defiant wouldn't dare try. She tries to visualize this footpath, each groove and turn that spirals downward, leading toward the sanitarium building. She thinks of the wooden pickets, corroded and galleried, that mark the boundary between untamed wilderness and manicured order, and presses in that direction, running her hands against the cool, rough bark of ancient trunks. Stray branches pluck at her exposed flesh, carving shallow trenches. She stops short when she hears footsteps approaching from behind, the cracking of twigs like gunfire on the front lines, ear-splitting against the silence. She turns quickly, fists balled in lamentable self-defense. "Jack?" she calls. "Jack, this isn't funny!" Nothing. She presses on, blindly forging through the brush, fingers tangling against the snarl of thick undergrowth. How far had they travelled? She had counted her steps when they first scaled the border fence, careful to keep track of their whereabouts, but now the numbers blur, swallowed by the strange new rhythm of the forest. She can sense a darkening canopy above her head, trees closing in like a tightening noose. Everything aches, her knees, her heart, her pride. She's ready to collapse with exhaustion, find some hollow to curl into for the night, when it appears. No more than 6 feet in front of her, splayed like a discarded marionette puppet, arms and legs bent at unnatural angles, bones poking through the thin layer of skin at the knees and elbows. The wrists are bound by what appears to be the corpse's large intestine, gelatinous and blooded, dashed with thick bluish veins like fat garden grubs burrowing into a summer squash. Jack Nelson's face gazes towards the heavens, mouth agape in a silent, anguished scream, eyes gone, tongue gone. An orange ember glows at his feet, a slapdash cross stains his forehead. From behind, the crack of a bone splintering between iron jaws. 2. Wednesday, March 17, 1919, Mammon Isle, Ontario, Canada. Through the soft tenor crooning of Red McIntyre comes the sound of someone screaming. Dorothy Gleason. It's become a daily ritual, this sorry display of immaturity. She'll kick and rage, she'll thrash her tiny fists against the linoleum, a broken vase here, a shattered window pane there. The other children, dressed in their nightclothes, sit cross-legged on their beds, taken with sheer fascination by this brilliant display. Leaning on their bony hands, their mouths partially agape, they watch in amazement as a burly man standing taller than 6'2" valiantly wages a losing battle against a flaxen-haired 9-year-old with lung scarring. The war between Burke Harley, head orderly, and Dot Gleason, lowly patient, is a daily affair that never ceases to lose its folly. There's not much entertainment round these parts, you understand. Red McIntyre, voice like soft velvet, hits the final. Note of Danny Boy with effortless resonance. The record comes to a screeching halt. The nurses coo and sing. Eliza McShane rushes to replace the needle, and the machine once again croaks to life, sputtering and grovelling before it resumes singing that damn song for the umpteenth time since morning. Oh, Danny Boy, the pipes are calling. Burke has Dot pinned to the floor, her chest rising and falling in ragged gasps beneath the weight of his forearm. Dot is dressed in only her cotton underthings. Her fist, bony and pale, collides with Burke's left temple. He lets out a piercing yelp, fastening her arms across her chest as the children gape and the nurses dance and sing to the tune of McIntyre's aria. Dot is not finished. She gives one final cry, the thin and strident sound of an animal caught in a hunter's trap, and, with a sharp knee, nabs Burke between the legs. The children cheer. Burke roars like a lion, releasing his grip and stumbling backward, knocking the horn from the ancient Victrola. The nurses loudly protest. McIntyre's song distorts and twists before the record begins to hiss and yowl like a cat in heat. A boot is pressed into the handsome young crooner's face, leaving a mark of discoloration on the album cover. Eliza sweeps in to rescue the record from further damage, clicking her tongue, holding it protectively, against her breast like a mother comforting a wounded child. "Really, Burke, you ought to be more careful." Dot Gleason, once more victorious, scurries to the corner of the room and pulls her knees to her chest. Her face is an angry crimson, her pale eyes wild. Between shuddered sobs, she yowls, "I won't take it! I won't!" Burke has regained his composure. He lumbers over to Dot, his jaw tight. The child cranes to look the giant man in the eye, Dorothy and Goliath. "Fine. Then don't take it." Dot slams her fists against the floor. The bottle of Mary Jane's premium liver oil, which has been balanced precariously on the floor at Burke's feet, capsizes, spilling a gloss of thick yellow sludge onto his shoes. The smell is abysmal. The children cover their noses, gagging beneath their palms. Burke swears. "Lay off it, Burke," says Katie Fletcher as she sweeps up the remnants of Dot's latest victim. A glass of lukewarm water meant for someone else. "If she doesn't want to take the damn stuff, you can't make her. Trust me, I've tried." The other nurses groan in mutual agreement. Burke punches the nearby wall, leaving a shallow dent in the crumbling plaster. "Little bitch!" Having recently returned home from the front lines, Burke Harley's demeanor has yet to alter from the animalistic brutality of a soldier to the benevolent humaneness required to be a hospital orderly. He's quick to anger and can't seem to hold his loose tongue. He bet Johnny Mason, a fellow soldier confined to the third-floor communal ward, to an innocent game of poker just the other evening, breaking a plethora of hospital rules under the guise of heedless camaraderie. It started out well enough, simple, blithe amusement between patient and staff, until Mason was accused of bluffing, to which the perpetually deadpan gent responded with a sly grin and a retort that cut deep into Harley's pride. "Too bad you can't catch cards like you caught the clap." It took 3 orderlies to tear Burke Harley from Johnny Mason. The poor patient begged for mercy between desperate sobs as Burke drove angry fists into his defenseless body, eyes gone feral and yellowed teeth barred. It was the Reverend Mother who finally separated the boys, dragging Burke into her office whilst the orderlies tended to Mason's injuries in the infirmary. Johnny Mason died later that evening, eyes gone, tongue gone. No one has spoken of him since. They considered, briefly, throwing Burke Harley out on his ample ass, letting him bounce twice on the paved walkway and shamble into the dark woods like the animal he is. But they quickly thought better of it. He knows too much. Even still, the threat of losing his situation has been weighing heavy on Burke's mind as of late. Now he inhales sharply, in through the nose and out through the mouth, just as Doc Poulsen had instructed during one of their many sessions. Rubbing his swollen knuckles against the palm of his left hand, Dot stares up at him with a sardonic, knowing expression. It takes every ounce of self-restraint not to clock her upside the head and knock that sly grin right from her lips. Burke's breathing grows rapid, his brow narrowing. Katie Fletcher loudly clears her throat, dissuading such barbarity. Then something sinister strikes him. "You know," Burke says finally, kneeling before the child, "there used to be another little girl round here, just about your age. Name of Sarah Mac G." Eliza scoffs indignantly. "There wasn't any patient named Sarah Mac G." Burke raises a hand to silence her. "She was here, for your time. Now shut your trap and learn to listen." He eyes Dot dangerously, lowering his voice to a mere whisper. "She looked a lot like you. Same yellow hair, same button nose, same big old mouth. She was always cheeking her superiors, causing a scene, and she never liked to take her liver oil neither. Used to cause a raucous stir every time someone tried to give it to her, would kick and scream like she had the devil inside. Dot's eyes widen. What happened to her? Well, I'm getting to that part. You see, she just up and disappeared one day. Went from sickly 1 minute to gone the next. Liar. Dot's ears burn red. Acid rises in the pit of her stomach. That's a lie, and liars go to hell. So did Sarah MacG. That's the real troubling part. Only one person knows what happened to her, and that person's me. I was there, and I saw it all go down, all right. In this very room, there I was, and there was too, sitting on her bed, that bed there. Burke points to Dot's cot, stripped bare and pocked with stains, and she was howling and howling, and I told her to quiet down, but she wouldn't listen. Just then, a great winged serpent came through the window, and it gobbled her up, Katie says, shaking her head incredulously. Is that it? Burke grins. No, that would have been too easy. With a captive audience in the palm of his hand, Burke assumes the role of a dramatic actor, turning his back on Dot and instead choosing to address the pale and sullen faces of the other children who stare, unblinking, from their beds. A ragged porcelain doll, dressed in a threadbare blue smock, sits on the windowsill watching the unfolding Abaddon with glassy eyes. Burke picks the doll up by its golden curls, swinging it carelessly as she speaks. You see, the serpent had been watching young Sarah MacG for quite some time. He knew she was the nastiest little girl in all of Canada. All the world, maybe. And he wanted her to learn a lesson that she'd not soon forget. First, he cut out her tongue with a rusty pair of garden shears so she couldn't go on screaming. Next, he chopped off her feet with a hacksaw so that she couldn't kick and stomp no more. Burke slams the doll's legs against the wall, shattering them into rigid wedges of ivory. The children startle at the sound. Little Tommy Matthews wets himself. Then it was her hands, so she couldn't hit and grab. He took 'em and hung 'em on the wall like a nice decoration. Her tiny white hands. He crushes the doll's porcelain hands with a clenched fist. He saved her head for last. It was such a pretty, pretty head that he wanted to look at it forever. He ripped out her teeth one by one so that he could keep her smile in his pocket. He plucked out her nice blue eyes, put 'em on a string and wore 'em round his neck like a fancy medallion. And there Sarah was. No hands, no legs, no eyes, and no tongue, trapped in the dark, unable to move, unable to scream. All she wanted was to die. She wanted nothing more than to be put out of her misery. But the serpent only laughed and said, "Oh no, my dear. Bad people don't get to die. They live forever and ever, just like their horrible deeds." So Sarah MacG is still out there. Right here on Mammon Isle, as a matter of fact. At night, she drags herself across the sod, right up to the window of this here ward, and she peers inside. There's a glowing blue light where her eyes should be, and her limbs are bloodied stumps coated in black flies and wriggling maggots. Her skin, all green and yellow like sickly mucus, is peeled right from her face, hanging from the rotting bone like torn butcher paper. And she makes the most horrible noise. Burke unhinges his jaw, expelling a low, jarring wail, haunting and melancholy, the cry of a tortured wraith, the cry of Sarah MacG. Then he sets the doll on the floor and, with a bout of ferocity, slams his boot hard against its porcelain face. It shatters into a fine white dust, scattering pieces of broken china and clumps of yellow curls across the linoleum. And, for good measure, he takes that damn red MC entire record from the Victrola and furiously tosses it against the wall, fracturing the shellac clean in two. He set the rest of the children crying and shaking beneath their sheets. The nurses hustle about, stroking backs, adjusting covers, whilst Burke, satisfied, straightens and crosses his arms against his broad chest. "So there. Really, Burke," Katie admonishes as she sops up the puddle of warm urine on Tommy Matthews's bed with a rag. "I don't know how you can think up such ghoulish stories." Tommy's cheeks glow a fluorescent pink beneath the electric lamp overhead. He covers the growing damp spot on his nightshirt with a frail hand. "Sorry, nurse. Sorry. Don't got to think up anything, really," Burke shrugs. "Spending all my time here is more than enough, what with all them people gone missing." Katie wrings out the rag, wiping her hands on the hem of her apron. Sybil Lindsay, plump and white as bread dough, rushes to exchange Tommy's soiled nightshirt for a clean, dry one. The boy's skin is grey, as thin as crepe paper pulled taut over his crooked, undersized ribcage. He reeks of a syrupy, rotten sweetness, the unmistakable stench of death. "He's next. We aren't supposed to talk about that," Eliza whimpers, collecting the shattered pieces of the record from the ground and placing them into her apron pocket. "Reverend Mother said so." "Yeah, I'm sure she did. It's been 3 weeks since Maisie Holloway and Jack Nelson were last accounted for, but time has only managed to sharpen the gossip surrounding their sudden disappearances. The others, the ones green enough to find scandal in every lopsided situation, have taken to dissecting the mystery over mealtimes, concocting ridiculous tales of forbidden romance and espionage that would shock even the most seasoned of novelists. Katie Fletcher claims the 2 handsome teens, whom attraction and solitude betrayed, were dishonorably released from their duties after they were found making passionate love behind the slaughterhouse. Eliza McShane, a right prude if ever there was one, denies any allegation that puts into question Maisie's good Christian name. She was needed elsewhere. One of the larger consumption sanitariums in Toronto, maybe. And as for Jack, well, everyone knows Jack likes to hit the stem. Maybe it finally caught up to him. Rhett Callahan, a skinny Englishman half-deaf from a childhood fever, has deduced that Maisie was with child, and in a moment of desperation drowned herself in the frigid waters of Anders Lake. "The clergy don't want us to know, see?" he said to Burke Harley over dinner the other night, practically, shouting creamed corn filling the gaps between his crooked teeth. And Jack, in his grief, went into the woods and drank lye, like the lovers in Macbeth or whatever. Pig Bennett, layers of greased flesh folding at his neck, chortled in reply as he spread an inch of butter onto his 7th roll of the evening. Old Jack's no pushover. He would have beat that child right out of her womb, mark me. I think he took off, went to the United States, probably working in some coal mine or on the railroad. Bastard was flighty, always up for adventure. There are others too, others who have vanished without a trace, the very old, the very young, the very sick. Though they went so quietly, no one has cared to notice. I noticed. Rain beats hard against the ward's large windows. There shall be no resting on the veranda today. The children pout and grovel at this realization, albeit with little fanfare. The consumption takes its toll, leaving them sluggish and wan. Besides, all this talk of ghosts has left everyone a bit skittish. Even the familiar scraping of the sycamore branches against the glass has taken on a rather sinister tone, as if the sound were made by Sarah MacG herself, rubbing her bloody maggot-coated stumps against the window, begging for sanctuary against the impending storm. Eliza draws the curtains, shutting out the grey daylight. It's all a bunch of hooey anyway. They don't notice the young woman traipsing up the path below, dodging raindrops, raven black hair clinging to cheeks dewy from the boat ride over, and deep-set black eyes partially concealed by her white postulant veil. When she reaches the front stoop, she pauses, gazing upon the mammoth building with a distant, forlorn expression. Inhaling sharply, she mounts the stone steps carefully and disappears beneath the eaves toward an uncertain future. She's home. Well, I best go back to the morgue before Reverend Mother takes a fit. Burke looks to Dot, still cowered in the corner, and smirks. "Maybe I'll see you there, girlie." He laughs. Dot's grimace does not falter. Her eyes are aflame as she opens her left palm, revealing 4 crudely rolled cigarettes, the final pawn in this dangerous game. A strange sound escapes Burke Harley's throat. Unfazed, Dot saunters over to the washstand and, with a confident shrug, sets the cigarettes into the empty basin. She lifts the pitcher, an ugly green and ivory clay covered in misshapen roses, and holds it triumphantly above her head. It's as if the world S suddenly moving at a funeral pace. Burke can only manage a curt, breathless "No!" before the child empties the watery contents of the pitcher into the basin. "I won't take it." And the cycle repeats. 3. There eyes a little girl who lives in the Reverend Mother's office. Encased in glass which has long been dirtied by a decade of curious fingertips, she watches over the hospital grounds like a silent sentinel. Her eyes are sharp, angry, as black and dangerous as Anders Lake on a stormy December afternoon. She squints in the early morning light, her left hand partially obscuring her thick eyebrows and broad forehead. Her hair, haphazardly cropped to the level of her ears, curtains a tan face with dark and shabby tendrils. Her mouth is an unbroken line, giving the queer impression of a child possessed by the temptation of knowledge. Someone, a man, I think, whose face has been erased by both time and the position of the wooden frame, firmly grasps the girl's narrow shoulders with gloved hands, as though she might suddenly awaken and run away. Where she'd go, I'm not so sure. There's no easy way of leaving Mammon Isle. I wonder what she thinks about as she watches day after day the humdrum goings-on of hospital life. Whose weeping has she heard? What delectable gossip has she preserved? A decade of arguments, the slamming of doors, the desperate pleas of distraught believers. Please save my husband, my wife, my child. Please don't let them die like this. Does she pity these poor misguided people who exist beyond the safety of the glass? Those eyes say otherwise. Today someone stares back, squinting her own black eyes in near identical fashion. The young woman carefully examines the photograph, whilst Reverend Mother rattles off an extensive knowledge about the long history of Mammon Isle proper. It was the lumberjacks first. They bought this land from the local tribe. Those Indians tried taking the whole county to court over their purchase of the property. The foliage in the area is sacred, or so they claimed, as if an allegation of such consequence has ever stopped governing men from industrializing before. Our diocese constructed the building in 1840. She has served as both a lunatic asylum and an orphanage, though to most, those things aren't so different. She chuckles. The young woman says nothing. The sanitarium opened early last year. As I'm sure you have gathered, Miss Sanderson, this island has been used to segregate the mainland's, how you say, undesirables for years now. And what with the frightening rise in consumption cases recently. This photograph, the young woman interjects, and Reverend Mother sighs, prepared to deliver her well-rehearsed spiel. You must tell them, but not too much. This is most important. Despite everything, they are safe here. This is God's own land. Tell them that they are safe here. One of those sensational stories they so love to print in those blasted Toronto papers, the Easter Day Massacre. Reverend Mother clears her throat. Yes. Have you read much about it? The young woman studies the photograph in an almost premeditated manner. The grey blur of sod beneath the child's feet, the hazy sky overhead, the familiar structure looming threateningly in the background. Yes. I've read about it. Truly was a tragedy, Reverend Mother says, cautiously approaching the young woman. There's a pained look in her eye, a sordid kind of remorse that glows like a loose ember beneath her immovable facade. The parish had yet to ship me, as it were, to Mammon Isle. I was merely a postulant then. My husband had died 2 years prior. Clarence, the dropsy, poor man. We were never blessed with children, he and I, so I was left to fend for myself. The girl? What girl? What about her? Her name? Reverend Mother eases back into her chair. The aging wood squeals beneath her substantial weight. As I said, Miss Sanderson, that was well before my time. She takes a decided gulp from the cup of Earl Grey positioned precariously on the edge of her desk. Well before my time, she repeats. Margaret moves to sit on the adjacent seat at Reverend Mother's request. You come from Quebec, Miss Sanderson, says Reverend Mother, and the young woman replies with a curt nod of her head. When did you arrive in Ontario? When I was 10. Her voice is low, enticing. Accompanied by her ever-furrowed brow and mature shape, it lends to the impression that she is far wiser than her scant years might permit. Why? Why what? Why did you leave Quebec, Miss Sanderson? Margaret shifts uncomfortably, her fingers nervously fondling the scratchy fabric of her frock. Why does one ever leave the place where they were born? Reverend Mother mumbles something under her breath, opening a small leather folder and retrieving the piece of parchment concealed within. There's a name written across the top in bold, precise lettering. Margaret Marie Sanderson. For a moment there is nothing but the sound of the spring rain tap-tap-tapping against the office window, and the occasional burst of frantic retching from the corridor. The music of St. Camillus. There's a choir practice in progress too, the ancient organ crooning at a halting speed from deep within the sanctuary. The cutting voices of the nurses follow at a similar pace. Unsure of the notes, unsure of themselves, unsure how they found themselves here in the first place. 40 days and 40 nights thou wast fasting in the wild. May I call you Margaret? The young woman nods. Tell me, Margaret, what really brings you to Mammon Isle? There has to be something. Nothing at all, Margaret replies too quickly. Then she stops, pulls in a sharp breath and says, I've come to help. I am under the impression that you have a restless soul. Are you sure St. Camillus is the place you'd like to call home? Yes, I'm sure. More coughing, more tapping. According to these references, you are easy to get along with, quiet and polite. You speak 3 languages fluently. And your previous experience is certainly impressive, Margaret, especially for one so young as yourself. Thank you, Ma'am. Reverend Mother. Thank you, Reverend Mother. The old nun chews the end of her fountain pen. You claim you come from a background of medicine, is that so? Your family? Yes, Reverend Mother. And would that be the European side or the Indian side? The air has grown very hot and very heavy. Reverend Mother's tone nearly boils my skin. My Ojibwa family, yes. My maternal grandmother was a medicine woman. Before Reverend Mother gains the opportunity of some hapless reply, the girl continues. But I can assure you, Reverend Mother, that you will find my methods are very much of the European standard. Good. Simple. Are they living? Reverend Mother asks carefully. Your family? Blood on white bedsheets. The sound of a knife piercing flesh. The crack of a hangman's noose. No. They're all gone now, like she's talking about cookies fresh from the oven. Reverend Mother rises from the desk and begins to pace, her long habit rustling against the cedar plank floor. The patients here have a very particular schedule, Miss Sanderson. It must be closely followed. This is most important. She shifts her gaze toward the office window. Without, the temperature is dropping. A thick fog has sheathed the grass and enveloped everything in its path. A storm is brewing. Margaret follows her watch across the grounds and towards the small overgrown cemetery that rests on the nearby hill, shrouded in low-lying mist, like something out of a ghost story. A mound of freshly churned earth marks the site of a recent burial. There is rounds and then breakfast, rest hour, chapel on Fridays and Sundays, reconciliation on Wednesdays, dinner, bedtime. This schedule, Miss Sanderson, must be observed at all costs. We take great pride in minding a standard of order and discipline. The patients here have been molested by a most cruelest of fates. Penitence, prayer, and solitude shall absolve them. Do I make myself quite clear? She taps her yellowed fingernails against the desk to further the severity of the topic. Is that where you bury them? Reverend Mother raises an inquisitive brow. I didn't think you squeamish, Miss Sanderson. Is that where you bury them? I hope you're not troubled by the idea of death. You're bound to see an awful lot of it here. That cemetery looks neglected. Yes. Well, there is quite a lot of work to be done around this hospital, Miss Sanderson. Work that is more important than... Reverend Mother takes a long, sloppy gulp from her teacup, dribbling Earl Grey down the front of her habit, then pulling weeds. It is then that the old nun stiffens, her demeanor growing timorous. She takes another sip, studying the girl guardedly, the high arch of her cheekbones, the wrinkle of her button nose, the long dark braid that snakes down the length of her back. She looks to the photograph on the wall. There's a shaky discomfort permeating the air, the feeling that something gone unspoken ought to be said. She fingers the various letters of reference that now litter the desk. A milky ring has formed on the upper corner of one, branding it with the unfortunate placement of her saucer. I must ask you, Miss Sanderson, and I implore you answer honestly. How did you come to find out about this nursing position? I saw an advertisement. In the newspaper. Did you now? Yes. Which newspaper? I'm sorry? Which newspaper did you see the advertisement? The Globe, Margaret answers quietly. I saw it in the Globe. Reverend Mother once more picks up her cup and saucer. They clatter in her unsteady hand. Are you quite sure? Yes, I'm sure. My girl, the old nun begins, voice low. You must be mistaken. No such advertisement was ever printed. Margaret blinks long and hard. Her breath hitches in her throat. Fasting with unceasing prayer, strong with thee to suffer pain. Why would you lie to me, Margaret? Then, if Satan on us press, Jesus, Saviour, hear our call. The church bell tolls. Reverend Mother rises from her seat with an air of finality. She collects the reference letters from the desk, dropping them unceremoniously into the waste paper basket. I'm afraid we will not be able to hire you at this time, Miss Sanderson. Reverend Mother, please. I am disinclined to consider candidates who lack transparency. Truthfulness is the price of entry here. On that, I remain firm. A man barges through the office door, shutting it with a loud thunk that rattles the window panes. In his haste, he nearly trips over the corner of the worn Persian rug, his breath coming in short and irritated bursts. Margaret stiffens. The man is frighteningly tall, far taller than anyone she has ever seen before, with a shock of golden blonde hair and sharp grey eyes that appear almost feral, even at ease. He wears a clerical tie, and although no older than herself, a constant time-worn glare. Father Lawrence. This is a surprise. Lawrence. She knew a Lawrence once, an Errol Lawrence, tall and fair with pale, soul-searching eyes despite his Cree roots. They called him Radish, white on the outside, red on the inside. Even then Margaret found this cruel, though the boy never seemed to pay the nickname much mind. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that few could match, and Margaret greatly admired. Stories filled the strange boy's head. He spoke of wendigos and thunderbirds. He claimed to see spectres in the dark, and one day he disappeared. "Who is this?" Father Lawrence's voice is a booming baritone. He studies Margaret methodically, as if trying to place her within a quilt of remembered faces. "Why has she come?" "Miss Sanderson has come to interview for a nursing position, Father," Reverend Mother says. She speaks to him in a patronizing tone, as though he is a little boy who has wandered into a room where he does not belong. "She was just leaving." "Sanderson, are you married?" "No," Margaret says quickly. "I've never been married, Father." Reverend Mother places a hesitant palm to Margaret's back, guiding her towards the office door. "Come now, Miss Sanderson. I'll have Freeman ferry you back to the mainland." "Not yet." Father Lawrence steals a glance at the framed article on the wall. The little girl stares back with a look of fierce defiance, far removed from the meek young woman who stands before him, hands folded, black eyes lowered with civility. "I am in authority here, Reverend Mother. I have not dismissed the young woman. Father Lawrence, you don't understand." "Sit, girl." Margaret sits. Father Lawrence retrieves the letters of reference from the wastepaper basket, analyzing each page with a keen eye. He lets out a soft hum of disapproval when he reviews Margaret's resume, noticing the gaps in her employment history. "Where were you between the years of 1913 and 1915, Miss Sanderson?" "This says nothing of your employment during that time." "Very strange." "I was unwell during that time, Father." "Unwell, you say? What ailed you?" Reverend Mother coughs politely. "Father, that seems a rather personal matter, don't you think?" He drops the stack of papers onto the desk with a cold, dismissive flick of his wrist. Reverend Mother startles at the sound. "What ailed you, Miss Sanderson?" he repeats. "Melancholia," Margaret replies frankly, sinking a bit lower in her chair. "I was unable to work during that time due to a bout of intense melancholia." She turns to Reverend Mother, expression unreadable. "But I am much better now. Were you institutionalized?" "I was," Margaret says, bracing for a torrent of judgment. "For a time? Where?" "Errol, that is quite enough of that." Reverend Mother busies her fat fingers with the beads of her wooden rosary. A measured clacking joins the sounds of the rain on the roof, the coughing from the corridor. "We needn't discuss this further. Errol Lawrence, she thought as much. I was treated at—" Margaret winces. Does she dare tell the whole truth? Father Lawrence looms over her with a withering stare, grey eyes so sharp they could cut glass. "A private facility," she says finally, "in Pickering." "Eventide Psychiatric?" "Yes, Father," Reverend Mother reminds her firmly. Margaret stifles a tired sigh. "Yes, Father. That's it." Father Lawrence folds himself into the soft leather chair near the door, crossing his long limbs with an elegance that belies his stern disposition. "Interesting. I'm well acquainted with the head doctor there. Percival Pratt. Perhaps I'll give him a ring, ask his opinion of your—" He extends his arm, retrieving a paper from the desk and scanning it complacently. "Your quiet punctuality." He forces a toothless smile. Margaret tenses. "Percival Pratt was not yet the head doctor when I was interned there." "Really?" "Yes. And who was the head doctor during your time at Eventide?" She can feel the words on her tongue, but she cannot find it to say them aloud. A silence settles between the trio like a fog rolling in from the coast, heavy and impenetrable. Father Lawrence peers at Margaret expectantly, waiting her response. "Reverend." Mother straightens a bit in her chair. "The doctor's name was—" "Yes?" "Doctor—" "Doctor?" Margaret casts a sidelong glance at the array of framed Rembrandt prints that decorate the walls. Her eyes settle on the flight into Egypt. The image speaks of a journey not unlike her own, a frightened but courageous young woman fleeing a world not yet ready to hear the gravity of her truth. "Dr. Joseph." She quickly reviews the cluttered contents of Reverend Mother's desk, eyes docking on the inkwell. "Joseph Quill. Joseph Quill. I see." Father Lawrence rises from his seat, brushing invisible dust from his cassock. He must be a rather enigmatic fellow, this Joseph Quill, considering Percival Pratt laid the foundation of Eventide brick by brick. He throws open the office door, which creaks hauntingly on its hinges, revealing a darkened hallways lined with portraits of clergymen past. The coughing and choir practice steadily increase in volume. "I think you'll do quite nicely, Miss Sanderson." "Father, I don't think Miss Sanderson is the right fit for our establishment. She will begin as soon as possible. Fetch her a clean uniform. Have one of the other nurses show her to the quarters, the homely one maybe." She's itching for someone to fraternize with. The rain is drumming hard now, a sharp rhythmic pounding like marbles against the gilt roof. "Why have you hired me?" Margaret asks finally. A flicker of amusement dances across the young priest's face. "Because I like you." And he is gone, shutting the door with a soft click, the lingering scent of his patchouli aftershave haunting the space he leaves behind. Father Lawrence recently transferred from St. Augustine in Whitby. He's a... Reverend Mother fumbles with her collar, a look of veiled contempt flashing across her face like lightning fleeting a stormy sky. "He's a rather hardened fellow, I'm inclined to say. He's a stand-in, for the time being. Come to replace our dear Father Railron, may God rest his soul. The grandfather clock in the lower hall strikes 12 noon. As Father Lawrence stated, you will begin immediately, Miss Sanderson." "Yes, Reverend Mother. Thank you. Don't thank me. If I had my way, you'd be back on the mainland by tea time. Once that man gets his mind wrapped around something, it is nearly impossible to unravel it. I tell you plain, I don't fancy the idea of a mental patient caring for our sick and dying. But I have no say in matters such as this." Margaret returns to the window, gazing pensively across the vast hospital grounds. Memories claw at her mind. The wailing and screaming, phantom hands against on her thighs, cupping her breasts, fresh blood on her lips. "I thought you weren't bothered by death." She hadn't noticed Reverend Mother's approach, and flinches when the old woman puts a firm hand to her shoulder. Reverend Mother gestures contemptuously toward the cemetery, eyes glinting with suspicion. "It doesn't matter much anyway. You'll get used to it. They always do. Death doesn't bother me," Margaret says coolly. "But injustice? Reverend Mother, injustice deeply troubles me." For the first time in a nearing decade, the little girl who lives in Reverend Mother's office grins, really and truly. 4. Eliza McShane looks like a scarecrow. Terribly skinny, she stands well over 6 feet tall and carries herself with a stiff, upright posture that conceives the impression she has been stuffed with straw. She has a pointed face like that of a sewer rat, and a big brown wart on the end of her beak-like nose, though she likes to imagine that it isn't there at all, that no one is calling her the Witch of the Wood behind her back. Margaret, a skillful watcher, studies the bony young woman who trots a good 4 paces ahead, the long frayed strings of her apron bouncing as she goes, and wonders how the good Lord in heaven could have created a creature, made in his own image, so terribly homely. Eliza McShane, a comportment of self-importance about her confident gait, wonders what might have compelled the dear Reverend Mother to invite a red savage into the welcoming embrace of St. Camillus. She'd earlier whispered to the others in the mess hall that her pa was once robbed at gunpoint by an Indian, on his way home from market. Took his wallet and would have taken his very scalp too had the sheriff not intervened. Thank heavens for small blessings. Thank heavens for good Christian law enforcement. The choir practice continues on in the sanctuary, the low hum of the organ pulsating the floorboards beneath Margaret's feet. They sing, "Just as I Am Without One Plea," a particular favourite of Eliza's. No one, she believes, can belt the upper notes of the old hymn better, not on Mammon Isle, not in all of Ontario. Eliza casts a quick glance at Margaret, forcing a smile so sweet it makes me want to vomit. Reverend Mother is a fool for calling me away from such an important rehearsal for such a trivial task as this, she thinks. The Indian won't last a month, no, a week, shut away on Mammon Isle. She'll go soft in the head from the solitude, slice our throats in the dead of night, sever our scalps as vulgar tokens. Instinctively, Eliza puts a hand to her throat, swallowing hard the lump that is caught there. If Minnie Fay is given my solo because of this, by God there'll be hell to pay. As they travel along, Eliza points out the storage closet. Everything you could ever need or want is kept in there. Careful. The door jams and the indoor privy, I tell you, they almost never clean in there. The pipes freeze in the winter. It's almost better to use the outhouse. Margaret cautiously absorbs her surroundings. Her eyes dart from one doorway to another, to the damp stone wall on her left, to the row of open windows on her right, lined with ashen figures in various stages of expiry. They hold their sweat-drenched faces out towards the coolness of the rainy afternoon, water pooling on the floor beneath their feet. Noticing this, Eliza lets out an irritated moan and makes her way to one of the great windows, pushing past the listless patients and slamming it shut with a sharp bang. Water seeps through the soles of her sensible shoes, dampening her woolen stockings. "No more fresh air today," Eliza coos. Reverend Mother says that we must keep the windows open at all times, even in the dead of winter. Fresh air is the best medicine, that's what they say. But I'm not so sure I agree with that. Slammed. Latched. You know how they say if you wash your hair and then go into the cold while it's still damp, you'll catch your death? A patient, an older woman with glassy eyes, grabs for Eliza's hand, grunting softly. Eliza reflexively pulls away. Well, how is this any different? I believe all of their modern ideas about treating tuberculosis, she pronounces the word perfectly, drawing out each syllable dramatically as if they've been individually rehearsed, is really what does the killing. Slammed. Latched. You know, I really wanted to be a proper doctor, but my PA says that medicine isn't a woman's place, and I don't agree with that notion in the slightest. I believe the medical profession is the perfect place for a woman. We have natural motherly instincts. Slammed. Latched. Healing instincts. The old woman with glassy eyes keels over and begins to choke on her own tongue. Margaret studies the patient, the paper white of her skin, the patches of pink scalp visible through her thin grey hair. Malformed appendages, all skin and bone, poke out from beneath her cotton nightdress. She presses her cheek to the chilled glass as though the window had never been latched at all, her expression distant, her lips blue. A corpse on proud display. Margaret places a tender hand on the woman's trembling shoulder. I'm sorry, she whispers, I'm so sorry. Eliza rests her palms on her narrow hips, urging Margaret to follow her into the stairway. Come on, we haven't got all day. The church bell tolls, a single low melancholic peal like the cry of a heartbroken mother. The hollow sound sends a surge of despair through Margaret, a sudden chill. Someone's died, Eliza states plainly. They always ring the bell when someone dies. You'll get awful sick of hearing that sound. It's the 4th time since morning. She disappears into the stairway, humming softly to herself. Margaret goes to follow, but the old woman catches her hand, driving crescent-shaped divots into the flesh of her palm. Her lips move as if to speak, yet no sound comes at first. Blood streaks her greying teeth like red paint. It is a fearful thing. Her voice is hoarse and stagnant, as though it has been shut away in some distant place, to fall into the hands of a living God. And she returns to her restful position, releasing Margaret's hand and closing her eyes. First the left, then the right. Eliza leads Margaret through the geriatric ward on the 3rd floor, rows upon rows of the wheezing and forgotten, wasting away beneath startlingly white bedsheets. There is an empty cot, freshly stripped, near the back of the room. Hester Anderson. Yesterday afternoon, blood everywhere. It's the wing reserved for the common residents next. Men to the left, women to the right. These patients are wasting in a way Margaret had previously thought impossible, lips chapped, complexions cadaverous. They look up from their beds with eyes that seem far too large for their skulls, their gaunt faces blank canvases desperate for colour. Margaret notes the stark uniformity of their appearances. Loose cotton nightshirts draped across their bodies like burial shrouds, hair that has been cropped close to the scalp. Bed sores and pustules scour their bare limbs. Dried blood stains their lips. Margaret can't help but think of these unfortunates as a collective, as if dying were an adjective used to describe not only their physical state, but the quiet resignation that has settled deep in their souls. Gone are all happy memories, birthdays and graduations, picnics by the seaside, Christmas mornings and stories by roaring bonfires. All that remains now are the haunting whispers of their past lives, overshadowed by the sterile, oppressive simplicity of this hospital. Within these walls, hope seems to hang in delicate balance, as fragile as a thread suspended in the wind. Reverend Mother says the quickest way to deliverance is through repentance. All of the patients at St. Camillus have sinned in some way. Trouble pursues the sinner, but the righteous are rewarded with good. That's Proverbs chapter 13, verse 21. And don't you ever forget it! What about you? Margaret asks. Are you a sinner? Eliza rubs her palms together anxiously. The weight of Margaret's stare has burrowed into her bones. We'd best get going. Up on the 4th floor you can still hear the choir practice, shrill voices and an out-of-tune organ muffled by the distance. They've never sounded better. I sing in the choir, Eliza announces as they stroll along, footsteps echoing down the barren hall like a tribal drumbeat. The isolation ward is hauntingly still. Doors hang ajar on rusted hinges. Paint peelings coat the dusty floor like fallen snow. A strange, acrid rot seeps from the damp stone walls. St. Camillus' lifeblood. I should be at rehearsal now, but Father Lawrence tasked me, and only me, with training the new hire. He wouldn't have entrusted anyone else with such an important assignment. I'll be head nurse in a year or two then that Honora Qualley will be sorry. I sing soprano, in the choir I mean. My pa used to tell me that I have a voice like a seasick blue jay, but Maestro Gordon, he's the organist. Virgil Gordon, caught it from his baby granddaughter, you know. Tuberculosis. Went down to Plattsville by train to pay. His son a visit was only gone the weekend. Well, if he didn't start coughing up a storm on the ride back. Just like that. She snaps her fingers. It happened so fast. His granddaughter died, poor lamb. So sad. His son was devastated. He blames himself, as he should, thank you very much. Precautions should have been taken as well, you know. He paid for all of the medical expenses. Maestro even has a private room on the 3rd floor all to himself. That costs a pretty penny. Gets a little lonely being all by yourself, I'd imagine. I wonder if he often thinks of his granddaughter. I know I would. There's a wooden bench to their left. 2 girls, 15 or 16 years, with crooked teeth and coarse hair, chatter excitedly. Between them sits a stack of metal dishes, a tarnished bedpan, a syringe. Eliza, ever the authoritarian, clears her throat in warning and taps a poster tacked to the wall. A colorized image of a delicate young woman dressed head to toe in fine furs, sitting down to afternoon tea. Her pretty pink lips are stitched shut with thread, a cryptic message written beneath her feet in bold red font. Speak today, never speak again. Eliza folds her hands. We ought to make a good impression, ladies. You know you're not permitted to chat outside of your quarters. Looking to Margaret, she whispers, Annette and Cecile. Scullery maids. They find themselves in an awful lot of trouble. I'm surprised they haven't been shipped back to the slums of Versailles. Rolling their eyes, the girls clumsily rise from the bench and begin down the long corridor, speaking quickly to each other in their native tongue. I hear Vacher and Le Saucier de Bois, the Witch of the Wood, among other mutterings. Eliza does not. Annette, the taller of the two and the fairer, locks eyes with Margaret, who averts her gaze and rubs the back of her neck with a cupped hand, feigning nonchalance. The poor girl looks as though she has seen a ghost. Her jaw hangs slack as she stumbles to catch up with shorter and plumper Cecile, who waits impatiently at the top of the stairwell. Eliza has busied herself with a pile of freshly washed linens left abandoned on a cart at the opposite end of the corridor. Those orderlies are going to be the death of me, no respect. But Margaret continues to watch the scullery maids from the corner of her eye, Annette whispering something into Cecile's ear, Cecile's face twisting in confusion, a laugh spilling out sudden and sharp before she claps a palm over. Her mouth. Ce n'est pas elle. It's not her. Annette, racked with nerves, shakes her head. Regarde-la dans les yeux. Look into her eyes. Now both girls study the new hire as though she is an unknown specimen in a laboratory. Margaret can sense their judgment, their fear, like fire on her skin. Cecile's voice is small when she finally speaks. Elle est la ville de Jacques Caron, le meurtrier. Margaret holds her stare without hesitation. A challenge. Vous ne devirez pas bavarder. You shouldn't gossip, she says. C'est ce que dit la Bible, so says the Bible. The girls disappear down the stairs, their pox-marked faces pale with fright. Anyway, Maestro Gordon says that I am one of the most beautiful soprano coloraturas he's ever heard. Eliza shrugs her shoulders and smiles, far too proud of herself. I'd sing for you now, but I have a nasty head cold. My nose is like a broken tap. Dr. Paulson says that I should be right as rain in no time, but he absolutely forbade me to sing. He said that he wouldn't want me to damage my exceptional gift. The only reason I attended that silly choir practice at all is because the others would be lost without my support. I'm an anchor voice. That's what Maestro Gordon says. He's nice, that Dr. Paulson. A real chuckaboo. Handsome, too. Something is moving, pacing back and forth behind a door at the end of the hall stamped maintenance. Keep out. Eliza carries on, her voice shrill as nails. Something about a Christmas cantata and undercooked trout. But Margaret can hardly hear a blasted word. The world before her blurs. Her ears buzz with a queer thrumming, the rapping of the rain on the windows, the soft pitter-patter of feet. Little feet, she thinks. Back and forth, louder and louder and louder. A small voice whimpers, Maggie. Margaret, there's someone behind that door. Eliza shakes her head. Not possible. They keep that room locked at all times. I'm one of the few nurses with a key. She fondles a ring of antique keys tied on a rope around her waist. Something is moving, trying to get out. Not possible. He cowers shamefully, a lit cigarette dangling from the corner of his mouth. a silver lighter enveloped in his right fist. He keeps repeating that dirty word, shit, 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 as he hastily shoves the lighter into the pocket of his trousers. Christ, Eliza, I thought you were the mother! Eliza crosses her arms. Where'd you get that cigarette? Burke relaxes against the doorframe. The good doctor, where else? You're not supposed to be smoking indoors. You know that. And you're not supposed to be such a bitch. He takes a drag. Homely girls are supposed to be sweeter than pretty ones. That's the universe's way. Eliza looks as though she may cry. Not the first time and not the last. The girl is made of water and piety. You're ridiculous. Something catches Burke's attention. The new hire with her long dark hair, her mature breast, the weighty look in her round black eyes. Well, hello, sunshine. Margaret is trembling, her breathing erratic. Burke notices his lips curling back into a bestial grin. Easy there, sunshine. Are you always like this, or are you just happy to see me? He points to her with the lit end of his cigarette. What's your name, girlie? Margaret says nothing. What? Cat got your tongue? Margaret says nothing. Come on. What's your name, pretty thing? Eliza briskly swipes her swollen eyes on the sleeve of her uniform. Her name is Margaret Sanderson. She's new. New? Margaret Sanderson. He says her name slowly, wetting his lips. She doesn't say much. Barely uttered a word since she got here. Burke crosses his arms, scanning Margaret with a practiced indifference. His muscles bulge beneath the fabric of his shirt. That's how I like 'em. I don't think she understands the language, to tell you the truth. Doesn't understand the language? What is she, a retard? No, she's not a retard. Makes one gal in this place. Eliza moves in close like she's sharing a dangerous secret. The orderly smells strongly of sweat, tobacco and booze. She's a red-blooded American Indian. As true as I'm standing here. Burke gives a low whistle, stubbing out the cigarette beneath the toe of his boot. He produces another from his apron pocket, lighting it as he speaks. You're awful pretty to be a real Indian. He slaps a hand over his mouth, letting out a tribal war whoop. That's how they're gonna call you to dinner, innit? The maintenance closet is practically empty. A broom here, a dustpan there, a tin bucket with a chip out of the lid, a pile of cigarette ash, a tangled web of low-hanging electrical wires that graze the top of Burke's head as he shifts about. Was there someone in there with you? The question catches Burke by surprise. What? Margaret repeats herself, louder, timbre wavering. Was there someone in there with you? I saw someone. A shadow, under the door. Burke shrugs. No, Mum. So you're more than welcome to join me, he winks. Dirty bastard. You're disgusting. Eliza sniffs. Come on, Margaret. Disgusting. Burke repeats, perfectly mimicking Eliza's dreadful little voice. You're disgusting. I saw something moving. Enough of that, Margaret. Maybe it was the ghost of Sarah MacG. Burke moans ominously, waggling his stubby fingers in Eliza's direction. Eliza swings a pointy fist, catching Burke's shoulder. Laughing, he nearly loses his balance and drops the cigarette positioned between his lips, setting the whole damn place ablaze. It'll happen someday. I'll be here when it does. I heard a child. Burke coils his torso, looking to Margaret quizzically. I can't say I'm much interested in children, miss. I like 'em old enough to know when to scream. Disgusting. You're disgusting, disgusting. And he pulls the closet door shut. Don't mind him, Eliza says loudly so that Burke might hear the distaste that clips the end of her words. He hasn't been the same since he got back from the front. He got himself shot in the foot, or so he says. Walked with a cane for a bit. If you ask, he'll tell you war stories that'll curl your hair. He didn't last too long. Only about, 3 months, I think. War to end all wars, my foot. As long as we allow men in politics, there'll be plenty more violence. Believe you me. The maintenance closet slowly disappears from view as the girls retrace their steps towards the stairwell, turning left and then right, and then left again. Margaret takes a moment to peer into one of the isolation rooms that flank the hallway. An iron-framed bed, dressed with military precision, the stark white sheets without a wrinkle, the pillow starched and firm. An ancient window allows beams of light to fight their way into the otherwise darkened space, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. There is a small prie-dieu to the right, a wardrobe to the left, the open door wobbling with the errant breeze that seeps through a hair-thin crack in the window. A small figure hovers behind it. It covers its face with tiny hands. It weeps softly. Maggie, I'm sorry. Maggie, please help me. Margaret blinks. It's gone. The isolation ward gives me the creeps, that's for sure and certain, Eliza offers with a shudder. It's the end of the line for a lot of folks who come here. There's a prickling sensation creeping up Margaret's spine. She thinks of the old woman by the window, her voice hoarse and her lips chapped. She thinks of the haunting, malnourished figures wasting away in their beds, the curious scullery maids in the corridor, the figure behind the door. It is not right here. She expected as much. Some things never change. That Burke Harley! I'll have to tell Reverend Mother about his smoking, don't you think? Heavens to Betsy. You know, Margaret, you should join the choir. I bet you're an alto. You look like an alto. 5. Montmagny, Quebec, Canada, 1898. She entered the world undersized and silent. The midwife, an Ojibwa woman of considerable age and experience, feared the child was stillborn. She drummed her fingers, crooked with arthritis, along the infant's tiny spine. She strained to hear the gasping of 2 small lungs struggling to breathe this new air. Come on, little one, fight for it. The mother, having already lost 2 daughters, one to the fever, one to the river, had long since resigned herself to a childless existence. She would cradle this little girl in her arms, speak to her in a soothing tone, tell her of all the wonderfully ordinary things that bring her great happiness. The slapping of frigid water on the bank, the triumphant flight of a hawk carrying the sky on his wing, the unimportant items of life so trivial they don't merit so much as a second thought from the living, the simple, everyday things her tiny daughter would never have the privilege of ignoring. Then, like her sisters before, the child would be laid to rest in the meadow under the shade of the old willow tree. There she could watch the village children, the healthy and spry little children, dangle from the branches and pull yellow flowers up by their roots, blissfully unaware of how lucky they were to be alive during such a moment in time. To her mother, the child was Megis, Shell. To her father, like hundreds upon thousands of other little daughters across Appalachia, she was simply Margaret. On the morning of her birth, no tears were shed. No one spoke above a whisper. It's mighty difficult to mourn a creature you do not know. Grunting in defeat, the midwife handed the infant to her expressionless mother. No matter, she said. You are still young, child. There will be others. Then came a shudder, a breath, the fluttering of 2 wide black eyes. Herrick entered the world screaming, stretching his healthy new lungs. The boy's powerful wails on that August evening signified the beginning of something transformative for the poor Karen family, whose bellies were concave with a hunger that never seemed to relent, and an ill fortunate that had haunted their bloodline for generations. The father, who'd already taken to calling his blueyed son Harry, had somehow scrounged the money to purchase cigars and rich whiskey for half the lumberjacks of their rowdy colony, in celebration of this newfound good fortunate. That night there had been music and dancing, and there were glassy-eyed men with wandering hands and scarlet women who stumbled about with their wild hair loose and their cheeks rouged. She remembers it well. The unmistakable aroma of boiled potatoes and souring milk, the stars in the sky like grains of salt against deep navy cloth, the bonfire that tickled the back of her throat and choked the air from her lungs. Nearly everyone called her Megis then. It had been 5 years, yet the child was still as silent as she'd been on the day of her birth. There was something strange about Jacques Caron's girl, everyone thought so. Wise beyond her years, Megis was. An old soul. She did not smile easily, nor did she delight in playing with the other children of the colony, the ones who ran barefoot through the wood and happily splashed about in the creek, catching wriggling carp with their bare hands and bringing it home for their plump and toothless mothers to boil for supper. No, Megis preferred to watch. At dawn, she would rise and watch the morning light set fire to the fading stars, rocketing brilliant streaks of yellow and pink across the atmosphere. She would watch the great red maple giggle as the breeze ruffled her hair in the warm sun of early afternoon. She would watch the bleak shadows cast by the dimming evening light through the sycamores waltz across the grass like elegant women draped in mourning lace. And, on that August night when the moon was high and the air was choked with the tart stench of bonfire smoke, and the music from Jean-Pierre's fiddle had reached a fevered pitch, she had watched her mother bleed to death. The father favoured the son. This was no great secret. Where Herrick, more often than ever Harry or Ricky or Monloop, was sandy-haired and fair-skinned like his European father Megis was lithe and dark, the spitting image of her mother's Ojibwa ancestors. And where Herrick was bold and playful, simple-minded and innocent, Megis remained quiet and intuitive, The girl's ever-present silence unnerved her father, and her observant eye made him fretful, made his blood run cold. Even when she slept, curled up the same way each night, hands crumpled, tan face pressed into the soiled canvas mattress, Jacques Caron was under the suspicion that his little daughter could see all. She could hear his thoughts, read the sheer desperation on his face when he'd stumble home from yet another fruitless day at the lumber mill. She'd known, even before his tearful confession at the evening's meagre supper table, that work had all but dried up, that there was nothing anyone could do but wait to starve. And she knew, although he preferred to believe otherwise, where the ladies who so often paid visit to their cabin would disappear after the fun was over, and the sticky red had been wiped clean from the walls and floor. In the darkness of the woodshed, he had been loosening an old rope from around a tiny white neck, mesmerized, almost aroused by the sound of life hissing from the limp body draped across his lap, when a sudden movement caught his eye. From the doorway came a small voice. "Papa!" he startled. "Margaret!" Bathed in hazy moonlight, the child fiddled with the skirt of her nightdress. Silky black hair fell to her waist, partially concealing a petite face and large, knowing eyes. Barely awake, she stretched her arms above her head, yawning warily. The cadaver had gone stiff. "What's wrong with her?" Jacques felt his cheeks redden. "Asleep. Are you sure?" She studied his face for a long while, pursing her lips. Her gaze darted between the guilt-stricken man and the motionless young woman draped across his lap, her muddy dress torn away, her rosy breasts exposed. That pink flesh, those ample breasts. How beautiful the young woman had been, like a princess in a fairy tale, tortured, stripped and cursed to spend all eternity trapped in dreamless slumber. Her name was Florence Leclerc. She had no eyes. Bed. Now. The child nodded, shutting the door, but the next night she had returned to that woodshed, and she watched. And watched, and she watched, and she watched. Night after night, from the safety of the darkened doorway, she watched plump brunettes whose blood pooled like black ink. She watched wire-thin blondes whose sweet laughter turned to shrill screams at the fright of it all. She heard old women beg for their long-dead mothers, young women bide time by speaking in hushed romantic tones, a little girl yelp like a wounded sparrow as the knife pierced through her gingham dress. Then they would sleep, and Megis would sleep too. They fled the village when the creek dried up. 6. Monday, March 17th, 1919, Mammon Isle, Ontario, Canada. The staff quarters are located one floor above the mortuary. Rumors say that, on the darkest nights when all is quiet, you can hear the telltale thumping of the dead being sent down the body chute, a concrete tube that leads to a network of interlocking catacombs beneath the building, conveniently designed to conceal fatalities from the other patients. Everyone calls these sinister passageways the death tunnels, much to Reverend Mother's chagrin. I've watched countless nurses, naive and curious, lay in bed and slow their breathing just a little, listening earnestly for that morbid clamor, desperate to prove the whispers true. I don't see what's so frightening about it all. Not when there's a whole ward of dying people right above their heads. The rooms in the quarters are narrow and papered with dark green damask intended, I believe, to appear sophisticated. The paper is peeling away at the corners and bunches up in ugly lumps during the heat of mid-July. It adds a sort of suffocating confinement to these rooms, a constant reminder of quickly beauty curdles under neglect. Margaret enters the room. Room 11, cautiously placing her folded uniform onto the warped oak dressed positioned next to the door. Sybil Lindsay, who sits on the edge of her bed lacing her boot, offers the girl a sympathetic smile. Margaret almost offers one in return, falters at the sound of distant rolling thunder beyond the window, and grimaces instead, her hands instinctively clenching into tight fists. "I'm Sybil," the plump nurse chirps. "Sybil Lindsay, you have the loveliest hair I've ever seen." She reaches out to stroke Margaret's long braid, which has slowly lost its tidy structure over the course of the day. Loose ends fly every which way, frazzled and still slightly damp from the rain. "May I fix it for you?" Margaret regards this friendly girl thoughtfully. Translucent hair, eyes pale as a blind man's, soft, spongy skin that dimples slightly on the right when she smiles, and she smiles often, her two front teeth slotted with a wide gap that makes her look like a Halloween jack-o'-lantern. She longs to hear Sybil's story. A young woman so pleasant, so pure, so full of goodness, seems to stand out conspicuously in a place as sterile as St. Camillus. She has soft hands that look as though they were made for kneading dough, rather than scrubbing bedpans, and a fresh, rosy quality that would serve far more graceful in a blooming field of wildflowers. Yet, here Sybil Lindsay sits in the dimness of the quarters, amidst the sorrow and hopelessness of this horrible place, like a sunbeam trapped behind a growing storm cloud. Margaret sits, allowing the girl to unbraid her long black hair with gentle hands. Thank you, Sybil. Thank you, Sybil. What's your name? Margaret hesitates. Margaret, Eliza says sharply. Margaret Sanderson. She's here to replace Maisie. Sybil pauses, her hands hovering in mid-air. Her voice is tight when she finally speaks. Oh, I see. What happened to Maisie? Margaret asks. Sybil and Eliza exchange a fretful look, neither girl bothering to answer the question aloud. Nevertheless, Margaret nods in understanding. Eliza hurries toward the bed in the far corner of the room, tapping it with her palm. This will be your bed. I sleep over there with Sybil to my right and Katie to my left. Nurse Howell sleeps over there. She points to a bed, worn and rusted, near the lone window. She's been here since this place was an orphanage. Reverend Mother thinks she's going mad. She gave Jimmy Steiner his cod liver oil 4 separate times last week. Can you believe it? 4 times, and Jimmy went right ahead and took it. He was much too polite to say boo. He's a sweet boy, that Jimmy Steiner. But Nurse Howell, crazy old lady. She should have been dismissed eons ago. Sybil runs her stout fingers through Margaret's hair, taking great care to smooth each tangle and bump. Her touch is tender, like a mother's, and Margaret closes her eyes, comforted by this rare moment of gentle affection. Sybil is good, she decides. Sybil is safe. I would love to have hair as long and beautiful as this. I bet it took years to grow. Eliza removes her cap, letting her own mousy brown hair fall over her shoulders in frizzy tendrils. You'd better keep it bundled at your neck, she says to Margaret wittingly, or Reverend Mother will make you chop it all off. Don't frighten the girl, Sybil says, looping thick locks of Margaret's dark hair into a tight plait. She just got here. Katie Fletcher had all her hair lopped off a few months ago. It kept falling out of her twist, so Reverend Mother took matters into her own hands. Eliza mimes a pair of scissors, slicing them wildly through the air. It used to hang all the way down her back, but now it barely reaches her shoulders. She cried and cried all night. You see, Reverend Mother thinks vanity is a sin, and I can't help but agree. Vanity and pride are a dangerous pair, always lurking on the edge of righteousness. That's what Reverend Mother always says anyway. That's why we crop the hair of all the patients who come here, to cleanse them, get them closer to God. That's not the truth, Eliza, and you know it. They crop the hair because of nits, nothing more. That's what they want you to think, but I know better. Heavens to Betsy. Lord knows Katie Fletcher could get closer to God. She's a... Eliza winces, cups her cheek, shapes the word whore with her lips. Goodness, Sybil says with a laugh. Here we are, going on, and we've barely asked Margaret a thing about herself. She secures the plait with a piece of white ribbon left over from a recent sewing project. Margaret stiffens. Where do you come from, Margaret? Around here? No. She's a red-blooded American Indian, as true as I'm standing here. And why is that such a scandal? Well, you know her kind are... Eliza theatrically whispers savages in Sybil's direction, as though it might float right over Margaret's head and rest quietly against Sybil's ear without stirring the manufactured peace in the room. You heard what happened to my pa. Sybil rolls her eyes. Don't mind, Eliza. Her voice is gentle, but there's no mistaking the sincerity in her tone. Don't mind any of them. I'm glad you're here, Margaret. Really, I am. Margaret's cheeks redden. A familiar warmth radiates from her stomach, nearly buckling her knees. Thank you. Any time, Sybil winks. Margaret rises, pacing the room like a caged animal. She stops before the single desk, cluttered with half-written letters and ink-blotted scraps, and picks up the sleeve of a record. A young man, hair red as a struck match, stares up at her with painted blue eyes. His cheekbones are high, jaw sharp, smile devilish and reckless. The girls around here are absolutely mad for him, Sybil says with a grin. Red MC entire. Who? Eliza gasps emphatically, snatching the sleeve from Margaret's hand. She holds it to her breast, spinning around the room like a child's top, before collapsing onto the bed. Only about the best Irish tenor who ever lived. He sings like an angel. And he's a real dreamboat, Sybil adds. Just look at him. Have you ever seen a more handsome fellow in all your life? Jesus, forgive me if that man were here. Margaret's heart sinks as Eliza slides the record into the Victrola. Red McIntyre croons to life, his voice lilting and pure. Over in Killarney many years ago, me mother sang a song to me, in tones so sweet and low, it is suddenly very difficult to breathe. The air in the damp quarters is heavy and reeks of a mould so ancient it seems to crawl inside and foment. Margaret feels as though her throat is closing in upon itself. She tears at the skin of her neck with dull nails, attempting to force the breath from her lungs. The Victrola crackles and snaps. Red McIntyre laments. Sybil watches it all unfold with a silent trepidation. Eliza lights a lamp with cool indifference. It's so terribly dark in here. She gestures absently to Margaret's bed. That bed used to belong to Maisie? As a matter of fact, yes. And you know what? She had the biggest lips I've ever seen. Sort of like a carp. You never answered my question. Margaret rises, her voice tight. What happened to her? Oh, it's mighty strange. Eliza leans against the wooden writing desk, rubbing her oversized palms together in nervous agitation. She left in the middle of the night. Didn't even bother to get dressed. Left everything behind. She couldn't have made it far, though. Not in these woods, in the fog and the dark. She returns to the bed, throwing open the trunk that perches at the foot. Inside, neatly folded, is a white nurse's uniform. On top sit a comb, a leather-bound Bible, a well-loved stuffed bear, the only artifacts of Maisie's existence. A small Sorrento music box, gold and black with a shiny lock, is haphazardly tucked beneath. Carved on the top is her name, Maisie Holloway, though the M of Maisie has tarnished, appearing more like an elongated letter V. To Ralu, Ralu, Ra, to Ralu, Rale, to Ralu, Ralu, Ra. Hush now, don't you cry. Margaret approaches the trunk, reaching out to touch the rough lettering of the music box, to fix that name, Maisie Holloway, firmly into her mind. Eliza abruptly slams the lid of the old trunk shut. Didn't your mother ever teach you not to poke around in other people's business? We really shouldn't snoop about, Sybil adds. It isn't proper. And anyway, Reverend Mother said that they'd be clearing away Maisie's belongings soon enough. Give them to the needy, maybe. What would the needy do with a smelly old bear? Eliza flops down on Katie Fletcher's bed, bouncing once, twice, 3 times. Do you think Burke Harley stopped making love to Katie when he couldn't run his fingers through her hair anymore? He sure loves her yellow hair. Outside, the pattering of spring rain has grown deafening. A clap of thunder, a brilliant bolt of lightning illuminates the ugly damask wallpaper in a ghostly haze. For a fleeting moment, it's standing right before her. Then, nothing. Well, he still seems to be smitten with her. He has a soft spot for Katie. Oh, Sybil, you are far too generous with that nasty Burke Harley. I saw them kissing behind the slaughterhouse the other day, and he had his head buried in her. Sybil's cheeks flush pink. She turns away with a giggle. I think Katie looks rather homely with her hair cut short. Eliza, that's not a nice thing to say. It makes her nose look big. Margaret looks to Eliza's beak-like nose, at the wart that perches on the tip, and bites her lip. She tries to focus her mind on the queer severity of the girl's chin, the poxmarks that speckle her cheeks. When that doesn't ease her discomfort, she peers at Sybil's plump lips, those round eyes that are so pale she wonders how they can see at all. Anxiety taps a steady rhythm against her thoughts. The braid is pulled too tight. The air is far too thick. The rain against the window is much too loud. Her eyes drift to the wallpaper, dusty and peeling, that wraps around the perimeter of the room, squeezing the air from her lungs. Eliza remains sprawled across the bed, her face buried in the diary which Katie has hidden beneath the box spring. With each furious clap of thunder, her face pales. It doesn't say anything about it in here, but she did write that Rhett Callahan is a good kisser. Isn't that wallpaper hideous? Sybil says to Margaret, offering a gap-toothed smile. It hurts my eyes, something awful. Oft in dreams I wander to that cot again, I fear her arms are hugging me as when she held me then. Margaret says nothing. You know, I always knew Rhett Callahan was a good kisser. And how would you know that, Eliza? I'm not sure. I just know, all right. I'm quite good at knowing such things. Tap, 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 tap. Tu ralu ralu ra, tu ralu rala, tu ralu ralu ra. Hush, now don't you cry. Your hair looks lovely like that, Margaret. Doesn't it look lovely, Eliza? Better put it up before Reverend Mother sees. Enough of that! She'll chop it off, mark me! Thunder! Lightning! Margaret says nothing. A pair of hollow eyes. The bridge of a skeletal nose. In her shock, Margaret stumbles backward, knocking a shin hard against the desk. The record stutters and clicks. Eliza startles at the sound, promptly shoving the stolen diary beneath a starched pillow. "Careful, Margaret. Are you all right? Told you she was a savage." Margaret watches the wallpaper. Tap, 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 tap. Tura, rala, lura. Hush. Cry. What are you looking at? What do you see? Margaret says nothing. Is it a spider? Rather clumsily, Eliza rises to her feet, holding the pillow to her breast, a sort of downy shield. Kill it! Oh, please kill it! I hate spiders! Margaret watches the wallpaper. Thunder, lightning, the brightest bolt yet, sets the room ablaze with blinding white light. That's when Margaret starts screaming. Monday, March 17th, 1919, from the desk of Mrs. Winifred Jessup. To whom it may concern. I would like to begin this letter by firmly stating that I do not condone the outdated beliefs of the Catholic faith, nor do I subscribe to any particular religious doctrine whatsoever. I write to you out of sheer desperation, for I cannot think of anywhere else I might turn in this most troubling of circumstances. At the time of composition, I sit next to my beloved Cornelius, tears stinging my eyes. I can scarcely endure the agony reflected on his pallid face. His body trembles, racked with fever, as this horrid sickness ravages him. To think that merely 6 weeks ago Cornelius was hale and lively, the picture of health. He has since been reduced to a writhing hulk of bones, his eyes sunken deep into his skull, his handsome face drawn and grey. Cornelius, who you may better know as Toronto's golden-voiced tenor Red McIntyre, is 25 years of age as of April the 7th. He and I currently reside in Toronto, spending our days making beautiful music and chasing my rambunctious little daughter Victoria, age 3, whose father, my late husband George Dudley, was declared missing in action somewhere over the coast of the North Sea as of July 1917. Cornelius looks upon the child as his own and has become a cornerstone in both of our lives, filling the emptiness left by George's. Presume death with unwavering devotion. If you keep up with the entertainment tabloids, you know that he and I were to be wed in late September. Now, as it stands, I am unsure whether or not he will live long enough to see that joyous day. The public does not know of Cornelius's affliction. Rumours have circulated, as rumours do, about his mysterious and abrupt exit from public eye, but I have endeavoured to keep the more personal details of our plight concealed from such idle scrutiny. Therefore I turn to you, hoping that you might offer some guidance during our darkest hour of need. Cornelius is a devout Irish Catholic. Born and raised in Killarney, a bone of contention between my proud English father and I, he is well versed in the ways of the Church and seldom missed a Sunday sermon prior to his illness. I know he will find great comfort in St. Camillus's familiar practices. I confided in one Father Charles Rye at Cornelius's parish, St. Jerome's, and he gave me a marvellous account of Mammon Isle's clean air, dense forestry and shimmering freshwater lake, as well as the righteous and upstanding faith community the clergy has cultivated there. Moreover, your little island is the perfect place to conceal this little secret of ours. I believe Cornelius's removal from the ever-ticking pulse of the city and the weight of his notoriety will do him some much-needed good. Admittedly, I initially intended to write the larger secular sanitariums closer to home. Cotton Tree is expected to remain at full capacity until mid-October. Shady Meadows is already full to the brim, and dying there is as common as breathing. So, in accordance with Father Rye's recommendation, I look to you and your God to rescue my love from this most terrible affliction, as well as the sin that might have led him there in the first place. I wouldn't be so inclined to disclose the more intimate details of our lives if not for a rather frightening series of events that have unfolded over these past long weeks. Even now I can hardly think of these incidents, as I am inclined to refer to these queer episodes of hysteria without quivering in fright, my heart hammering hard against my chest. I am not a superstitious woman, this much is true, yet I find it quite difficult to see any rational explanation for the sudden onset of Cornelius's odd behaviour. Perhaps his fits of delirium are merely concurrent with the high fever that is so often prevalent among consumptives. This seems the most likely culprit. But it's the way that he addresses that unseen entity at the foot of our bed that disturbs me most of all. He speaks as if he knows this person, this thing, quite well, as though they are kin and have been for some time. It seems the apparitions come only by night, around 3 o'clock, I'd say, when the moon is at her highest and all is still. It does not matter if Cornelius is fast. Asleep or merely drifting in and out of lucidity, he will bolt upright and shriek as though he has been torn from some dreadful nightmare. He speaks hurriedly. I can barely make out his words, especially in my own groggy state, though I have learned to listen for key phrases. "What do you want of me?" announces the beginning of this nightly charade. "I'm not ready" is repeated in rapid succession, followed by a bleak closing remark, "I am sorry," after which Cornelius will fall into a silent slumber, only to be awoken by a fit of violent retching in the morning. If you are still reading this letter, I pray that you find it in your heart to sympathize with our plight. I've barely slept a wink over the past few weeks, and my mind is beginning to go fuzzy. Sometimes I fear that I'm beginning to see things too. So, I beg you, please help my dear Cornelius. Please help my little Victoria. Please help me. Cornelius is a good man, an honest and godly man, and I cannot bear to lose him this way. If there is indeed some divine power that controls the wills of all, I pray that he will take pity on our lives and rescue us from this earthly damnation." Cornelius has awoken now. He is twitching and moaning, a sure sign that another episode is inevitable. I sit by his side, my daughter fast asleep at my feet. She cannot stand to be out of his sight for longer than an hour. Victoria has already lost one father, she cannot lose another. Now he is clutching for my wrist. His hands are so thin that I fear if I were to loosen his grasp, his bones might crumble like dry clay. The screaming has started now. He points to an unseen figure at the end of our bed. The lamp is lit on our bedside table, filling the room with a comforting warmth. I don't see a thing. He does. I try to assure Cornelius that I am here beside him, that he is safe, but he does not listen. He flails about, choking on the mucus lodged deep in within his lungs. Victoria begins to cry. I begin to cry too. He is addressing the being now. I don't have the heart to repeat what he says. Help us, please. Sincerely, Winifred Jessup. On behalf of Cornelius MacIntyre.